Hey everyone, welcome to our Facebook Live. We are here with Mr. Jay Mason, owner of Truman Cannabis, and Dr. Kurt Kinard. Today we are going to be talking about terpenes. So I'll give you all some general information on that, and I'll hand it over to Dr. Kinard.
Great. Thank you, Aiden. I appreciate that. Yes, I'm Kirk Kinard, the proprietor of Paul's Pain and Wellness Medical Cannabis Clinics, and we have been in operation for a couple of years, and we have multiple followers, and we appreciate you and hope to kind of bring relevant topics and topics of interest to you. We take your questions in between sessions and research them and try to provide some relative content. And that is why I asked Jay Mason to join us today. He is an industry member, but he's on the educational effort as well with a great website with tons of information and a nice printed pamphlet too that our clinics actually use to help educate patients. Um, with that introduction with Jay, everybody has known me. We've been doing Facebook Lives for more than a year now, and I know you get mundane just hearing from me all the time, so I like to bring some guests. So Jay, we're glad to have you. We've known each other, and I know that you're fighting the good fight on the educational front, and it's so important. We've talked about it a bunch. I want you to just kind of give the audience an idea of how you got involved in the industry and you're passionate about it and why that is, and then we'll kind of pivot to something a little bit more specific regarding terpenes because you have a lot of information on that, and patients, believe it or not, they want to know more than how much THC.
Good.
They know there's more to it, and we do, but what is there to it, and what do terpenes mean, and how important are they, and how can patients enhance their response to medical cannabis for whatever the ailment or condition with terpenes, and help them try to figure that out. So, with no further ado, I'll let you take it away, and we'll just kind of talk through it.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. Earlier this morning, I went by your location in Tupelo on Trump Street or on Thomas Street.
Yes.
And where I grew up, the Thomas Street School playground and my backyard were together. So
Okay.
that's where I grew up. Yeah, I graduated from Tupelo High in 1983 and grew up in an environment where my father was minister of music at Harrisburg, the largest Baptist church. So I grew up with my cannabis thoughts being if I use cannabis today, then tomorrow I would die with a heroin needle in my arm. So,
Right.
and that's how I was raised. That's how I raised my children. I've had to apologize to them, but things evolve. I was diagnosed with prostate cancer about 3 years ago, which is what got me involved in it. Everything's fine now. Actually, I went to Paul's Pain for my initial certification for
Okay.
medical.
Great.
Yeah, and my wonderful wife is a physician and a prescriber and a proponent of responsible cannabis use. So it's been one of those evolutions from CBD to learning about cannabis. My business background has been different areas, cybersecurity, medical malpractice, I've owned different data companies, all kind of focusing on taking information and combining it into a usable format, which is what I'm trying to do with the terpenes.
Great. Well, that makes sense as to how well it's done, if that's your
Thank you.
background, because your website is impressive, and there I know you've updated it recently, so you can tell us about that and how people can use it and and get a copy of the pamphlet. I know you make your rounds, but you can't get to everyone,
Yeah.
and then we can focus in on the terpene specific. What have you seen in your experience in the industry that make terpenes important, and why would they be important for patients?
Yeah. Well, something that you see in the evolution and what has happened in other states is when medical cannabis is first legalized, the first measure is how much THC. The highest THC means the best. Now, after a couple of years, we're in an evolution where it's okay, what's the percentage of terpenes? And now the common belief is more terpenes is better. But the real question is which terpenes are in that mix? Do you really want more of what you don't want? So it's part of the evolution, and as people learn more about terpenes, the focus is going to be changing from how much to what are they. And
Yeah,
that's where the education comes involved because all the terpenes affect your body differently. They react to different ailments differently. And there's still so much we don't know, but we're just trying to do our best with what we do know.
right. Perfect. Yeah, the biology of terpenes or the botany of it is very interesting for the plant. They're naturally produced chemical a lot of times to be an attractant or something that deters pests from the
Right.
plant itself. You know, they have a smell and a taste to insects, and they have a smell and taste to humans, and that kind of in experienced users, they can pick up different strains of flower with different contents and kind of tell them apart by their smell or their
Absolutely.
taste. So, you know, there's an aesthetic quality to them, there's a protective quality to the plant, but what we found in what 30 plus years of use in a combined or medical program since California started it in 1996 is that they do matter. We just got to figure out why they matter and when they matter and which one. So you make a good point. So if you can tell us some of the more common ones and their applications, and then what you've seen in the industry in their response to that and their participation in labeling products and in producing products that have terpene contents that may target one symptom better than another to help patients.
Sure. Let me share my screen with you,
Okay, perfect.
which will identify some areas. So bear with me on this. So I'm assuming you can see this, which is the main website.
Let's see. I'm not seeing anything quite yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. There we go. So this is the main THC website, so just thc.ms. If you, a lot of information on here. There's a list of all the, not all the prescribers, but as well as we can do for listing the prescribers in the state, the different dispensaries, as good as we can. For patients, there's a bud tender directory. There's different videos on questions about cannabis. But as far as the terpenes go, uh, what we want to do is we want to look at the terpene guide. And what this does, and it really is just combining information that is available if you know where to get it. There's nothing special about it. But with the terpenes, there's about, I don't know, anywhere from 8 to 12, I would say, main terpenes. And what a terpene is when you look at the plant, it's that sticky part, the part that looks like it's from a Men in Black movie. And what you were saying, Dr. Kinard, about the pesticide, that stickiness for insects is what it, attracts the insects and keeps them there. But in cannabis, right now we're at about 200 known terpenes, and more are being discovered all the time. And one of the things that makes studying terpenes difficult beyond the legislative concerns, and I was talking to Dr. Boyette about this the other day, is that in medicine, a lot of the time, the studies are made to isolate specific molecules. Let's study this one specific element. Let's study THC, let's study CB, whatever. And value does come from that, but with cannabis, everything works together. So the terpenes are important. One way to think about it is maybe think THC is the accelerator. That's how fast you go. Something like CBD's gonna put the brakes on it, and terpenes kind of determine which direction cannabis takes you. So all things being equal, as far as growing conditions, everything else that goes into it, if you can get the top three terpenes in order, and that's what this chart shows here. So what this shows is it shows the strain name, the genetics, so the mother and the father. This number is percent indica, percent sativa, and we could have a whole another training session on that. And then these are the top three terpenes in order. This doesn't go into what the terpenes are good for doing. But what it does and where the magic happens is where it breaks them down into families. So for example, we'll just look at this one, for example. So all of the strains that have these three terpenes in order, everything else being equal, they're going to have the same taste, the same effect, the same smell. And that's what terpenes do, is they determine the taste and the smell of the cannabis. And that's important. It affects your olfactory senses, the limbic system, memory, behavior, emotions, all of that. And it all works together in determining the overall effect. And with terpenes, it's important not to just look at these top three. They're important, but you have to look at the whole mix. There's 150, 200 of them, and they all interact with each other differently, and it depends on a whole different set of circumstances. So this is all designed to be a starting point. It's designed to help patients avoid things they don't like. For example, I don't like caryophyllene. I don't like the spiciness of it, so I try to avoid those. I also put in some old strains. So people our age, I don't know, maybe if we had have used cannabis when we were 18, 19 years old and remember a strain name, maybe we can help match it up to something available today, if that were to happen. So that's kind of the science behind it. It's not meant to be an encyclopedia. It's meant to be a starting point in a way to really, start trying to realize how terpenes affect the overall plant, how it all works together.
Yeah. Wow.
And with cannabis, one of the two things that we look at for terpenes, or that we started looking at, what's amazing to me, by the way, is that this seems to be the only time it's been organized like this, which I don't understand. Hopefully it has, and I just haven't found it. But the two things that I'm really trying to focus on from a medicinal standpoint are two questions. One is, for what specific medical conditions does cannabis work best for? Because we know it works better for anxiety than a toenail problem, fungus. So the first question was, where does cannabis work best? And then for each individual condition, what's the best mix of cannabinoids? What's the best mix of terpenes? Are there any other supplements? But there is so much that we don't know. Terpenes are the building block. They work in conjunction with the cannabinoids. There are, for each of these terpenes, like myrcene pinene, for example, is from pine needles. It's a bronchodilator. I don't even think I said that correctly, but there's
You did.
all kinds of terpenes like limonene. The machine that takes the raw cannabis and converts it into oil, they could just as easily use lemon peels and get the limonene. So within these terpenes, you also have to understand that they are very volatile and they react different whether they're smoked and whether they're done by vaporization, whether it's an edible. Uh, all those sorts of things have to be taken into account. We know that if a particular mix of terpenes works for one person, it may work a little bit differently for another person. If they're taken as an edible, they're all going to break down differently and not be as effective. And for all these terpenes, there's different levels of volatility. So there's different boiling points, there's different levels of effectiveness. So there's even different methods of vaporizers and ways to ingest it that can be geared toward taking advantage of certain terpenes. You can get about as deep as you want to, but the bottom line is the better job we can do of explaining the importance of terpenes in the overall picture of how it affects specific medical conditions, the better job we'll do of pointing patients in the right direction and hopefully avoiding an experience where somebody says, you know what, I tried it once, I didn't like it, it wasn't for me, and I'm never going to try it again. So from that level of education, starting from the patient, prescriber, dispensary, all the way up. It's just critically important that we can find this information, figure out how it fits in our Mississippi environment. All this information is great, but if we don't know how to use it within our regulations and our dispensaries and our strains, it doesn't do us much good. So, um, anything we can do to help spread the education, to help patients, um, I think it's a drug that can benefit a whole lot of people. And
Oh yeah.
it's a very, very important that it be done correctly and in the best manner possible. And I take it very seriously. So
Yeah.
this information is fantastic. It's fun to look at. It's fun to study. Being a cannabis geek is, I'm fine with that title.
Hey, we need cannabis geeks. I mean, professionally, they're called researchers, right? So,
I like that.
they
I
don't
like
call
that.
themselves geeks, but everybody else does. But hey, we need them, and and you should be excited about being involved in that level because I am because we need that level of specificity if we're going to stick to this continuum of a medical experience. I have always said that if we'd have passed recreational marijuana, I wouldn't have much of a role. I mean, I'm not for or against, honestly, recreational. I hadn't spent a lot of time thinking about that. I can say that I'm for medical because I have some control over that. That's my background. I went to
Right.
medical school. I did a anesthesia residency, which is filled with pharmacology because I like that. So I immersed myself in the literature and the biology of cannabis, and I believe in it. And so 2 years later, um, I have convinced myself through patient testimonials, thousands of them that we've certified, that there's a lot of smoke to this fire, no pun intended.
Mhm.
Um, we know that the entourage effect, which is the synergistic culmination of all the helpful chemicals in cannabis that we don't fully understand, we know that that's meaningful. So,
Right.
a THC serum alone with the THC isolated out versus a CBD gummy with the THC isolated out and not much terpene because of the way it was produced. We know that there's going to be major limitations on that, and we haven't really had a chance to study it from a pharmaceutical standpoint. Even Ole Miss, who's kind of owned the rights to the strain that could be researched all these years, it has to be the same exact profile of CBD, THC, terpenes, and it can't change. Well, that doesn't replicate the industry because it's so
Yeah.
broad and so vast and moving so fast. That's why I'm not I'm not taking over here, but there's an important point to be made. Expanding our program by adding more conditions will simply allow us to do an ongoing self-reported data trial that replicates real world evidence that we're seeing boots
Mhm.
on the ground where we can give the dispensaries and the cultivators real feedback about what's working or not, as opposed to let's go study limonene heavy strains, spend 2 years studying it. The data's maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, but we've waited 2 years. We haven't done anything for those patients in those 2 years where we can go directly to the source with the knowledge that we know, guide them the best we can, and get that self-reported data and let that drive our decision making. I know it's not a double-blind, placebo-controlled trial every time, but when you have something that's proven to be so safe, I mean, if we were talking about a new
Right.
opioid, we're not doing a self experiment with opioids, but clearly there's not an epidemic of marijuana overdoses. There is something called cannabis use disorder and cannabis hyperemesis syndrome, and these things that if you overdo it heavy, and usually that's in young adolescents that it's happening in. Yes, there can be problems. It can be problematic, but in our experience of certifying thousands of patients and sending them to a place that's held to the standard that dispensaries are for labeling, product safety, certificate of analysis, seed to sale tracking
Mhm.
from growth to put on the shelf. When you direct patients at all and they go and get it from a safe source like that, the incidence of complications outside of efficacy is not nil, but as close as you can get. And I'll tell you, it beats a lot of drugs that can be found over the counter, including NSAIDs right now. NSAIDs, ibuprofen, Aleve, in excess can lead to gastric ulcers, stroke, heart attack,
Oh,
kidney failure. I mean, cannabis results in a feeling of euphoria to the point where you may get paranoid, uncomfortable, nauseated, but it's self-limited
mhm.
hydration, get in a quiet room, sleep it off.
It's
Okay.
gonna be okay.
Yeah, you don't wake up dead, like I like to say. And I've been managing patients through the opioid crisis, so I'm very well aware of how pen to pad could result in death, even if someone isn't intentional in trying to overdose. In
Right.
this case, they can get it wrong a few times and make up and stay on track and give themselves a chance. So they don't have to give up on it. But the best we can start them out, that's going to be their best chance. So knowledge is key. And so thank you for
Oh,
breaking that down. This is a very helpful resource for patients as they go into the dispensaries. They can check off that. Well, that's exactly what I got, and here's how it went. So it's either they draw a line through it and don't get it again, and they move on to the next one. It's very helpful to do that selection process for yourself if you're motivated, and it helps the provider to guide them.
it is, and there are a lot of other different condition or different factors beside terpenes. There's the
Sure.
THC level, the CBD level. It all works together. But by giving the patients the most education that we can to ask the right questions, it'll
Right.
force the conversation to, and a patient really should start off the conversation with, here's what I want cannabis to do for me. Here's the desired effect, and then
That's right.
let it flow
And
from
that's that's that medical experience. That's what I want to promote, and I want to relieve legislators, lawmakers, the public to know that as long as we have these rules and regulations guiding the necessity to see a medical practitioner, you're
there.
protected by all of those things that would protect you from any treatment and any drug trial. But I can't protect you by telling you to order it online and good luck and call you on the phone and try to walk you through it. You need to have the medical experience, and not all patients need that level of oversight, but they can take it or leave it. They still need to come and be registered and get a card and do a professional process. But some
Mhm.
patients really do need that help, and um, I like talking to people that I don't have to convince of that, and I do want to reassure the public that you know, I know it can be inconvenient and you already think you have it down pat and everything's going well, but you'd be surprised how much you could learn. And patients over and over say, I didn't think there was anything I could learn. I thought I would teach you a thing or two.
Yeah.
But they come in and then they go to the dispensary and they're like, whoa, all these formulations that are available and I didn't know about this. And so embrace it,
It's
embrace the
a
process.
it's a different world, When I was 18 years old or so, living in Tupelo, if I were to buy marijuana at that time, it would have an average THC of around 2%.
Right.
Today we're shooting around 30%. So it's just a completely different world, than it was before. But every day we're learning more and more about what cannabis can do, how healthy of an alternative it is to other more dangerous drugs. So I think we're at the cusp of something pretty exciting.
I agree. Well, I think I told you it would go quick.
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
already up against our time for this session, and it was excellent. And it leads me to believe that we have opportunity to do more on some other topics if you're interested. And I certainly am. So I
Sure.
appreciate you, Jay, Aiden, and the rest of the Facebook Live group. I really appreciate you being attentive. Always fire off your questions. We're glad to get to them. We try to bring relevant topics, and it's for you. But we learn a lot from our guests as well. So thank you again.
Yep.
All
Well, thanks
right.
for including me. And any questions, any way I can help, please just let me